Spinning. All right, 3, 2, 1. Cancel that. That's way too quiet. I didn't turn that. Stop it. Oh, gosh. I hate this record button. There we go. It's good because you can't accidentally bump it off, but then if you try and turn it off on purpose too soon, it won't do it.
We're going to have to do a new StreamYard now?
What?
Nah, it's fine. Behind the scenes look.
3, 2, 1. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Go Hunt, the Everman's Hunting and Outdoor Podcast. We aren't experts, but we're out there doing it. Join us on our journey. As always, we have Mike Gonsalves, the human pheasant, Dave Packard, who plowed a bunny, but not in the way you think, Vince H., who's working overtime, and recently back from running 400 cases of Coors from Texarkana to Atlanta. I am Sam Alexander. Tonight we have a special guest, expert in judging the relative speed of laden and unladen rifles, Kyle with Riflespeed. Howdy.
Howdy.
What do you mean, African or European rifles?
Asian.
Why?
Wow.
Way to kill a conversation.
Yeah, well, that's what we're good at.
Apparently
Welcome to
that's
the show,
a joke
Kyle.
that 2 people got.
Thanks, guys. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's good to have you.
So
go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead. I'm going to mute, so I just shut up.
Vince, you go.
All right, so we got Kyle here with Riflespeed. Kyle, why don't you just go ahead and give us about 1,000-foot overview, a little bit about yourself, and your career leading up to Riflespeed, and then we can get into the subject matter.
Yeah, great. So like a lot of you guys, probably I've been a total outdoor and firearms nerd since I was a kid, and have always steered myself and my career towards that end. And it's turned into what's really been a big thing over the last few years for us with Riflespeed. I've been in the firearms industry now for around roughly 20 something years. After I left the Army, I worked as a security contractor for a while, was a firearms instructor for a while. First job in the industry was with Barrett Firearms, Tennessee company. I'm a Tennessee native. Stayed there for several years and worked on some really cool projects there. Worked as the director of sales for Exos Defense, which is the commercial arm of a large military contract manufacturer that does tons of OEM and industry work, which gave me all the visibility on kind of the back end and manufacturing side, and a lot of the relationships there, led to later things for me. Was co-owner of Armageddon Gear for a number of years, shot rifle matches all over the country, kind of as parts of these jobs, and a weekend match in Douglas, Wyoming led to where I am today. We were shooting a 2-day match. Day 1 was 70 degrees and beautiful. Day 2 was below freezing with a foot of snow on the ground, and I had a rifle that didn't work. And that's where this whole thing started.
Typical Wyoming. Got it. I mean, honestly, typical just anything Rocky Mountain weather, I swear.
Yep. I think this is in April. So just, that worst time of year.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we just went through that, it was, fairly nice and warm up here. And on the drive home, I gained about 1,000-foot elevation on the drive home. And it's like, oh, now it's basically a blizzard. Wonderful.
Yep.
Dude, I was out of my thermals at work last week, back in them this week.
I thought Sam was going to start talking about AKs and knocking the AR. His rifle is fine. That's why never mind.
I would say that had absolutely no connection to anything, but all right.
Which is why he thought you were going to do it.
Yeah. No, it did.
Hey, we can talk AKs too.
I mean, that's my specific speed, but these guys are all vanilla.
Bullshit.
He's made for
vanilla.
cold.
I've got both.
¿Por qué no los dos?
Exactly. See.
Anyway, so rifle matchup in Douglas. Rifle wouldn't work.
Yeah, so this was I was shooting carbine division. This rifle match, I think it was the first one. This was put on by the Competition Dynamics crew, Zach Smith and the guys that run Thunder Beast suppressors. They put on rifle matches, the Steel Safari, which is my all-time favorite. There's a Team Safari. I think this was if I remember right, this was the Rocky Mountain Steel Challenge or Rocky Mountain Steel Quest or something like that. Anyway, I was shooting a carbine division. At the time, I was working for Exos Defense. We had the carbine related products. So we were a match sponsor, and I went to shoot this match. And, the day one of the match, beautiful, sunny spring day. And I was in first place by such a huge lead that there was like no chance that the second place guy could possibly catch me. So I go to bed that night thinking, I've got this thing in the bag. I'm like, what's on the prize table? All the things that you should never do during a rifle match. I'm doing all of them. So I get up the next day and I slide open the curtains on the hotel room, and I'm looking out and everything is covered in snow, total change here. And just the way the rotation worked out, I was the first shooter on the course that day. So worst case scenario compounded with worst case scenario here, because all of the targets are covered in ice and snow against a background of ice and snow, which means there's snow covered targets on a background of snow, which means they're invisible. So that's problem number one. Problem number two, I realized quickly, is that my gun doesn't work. So of course, it was 50, 60 degrees, probably more than that, probably 70 degrees colder than it had been the previous day. And my 16-inch mid-length AR-15 with factory match ammunition that had been completely reliable the entire time I've had this rifle. This is, and I've still got it. This is one of my all-time favorite ARs. Completely ceased to function as a semi-automatic rifle. So went through the course, totally bombed, ended up in third place from a, can't lose kind of finish the first day. But it started this whole process and really an awakening in my mind where I realized that even though, I had carried this firearm professionally in the military, I'd been in the industry for all these years, literally making a living on the AR-15 rifle, I didn't know enough about it. Went on this whole process, realizing, what had happened, kind of doing the forensics in reverse, where the rifle was functioning fine in these moderate or temperate conditions. Like, most of us go to the range on a nice day. At least if you live, where I do, most days are nice enough. You can go enjoy a day. And if it's, 12 degrees and blowing snow, we're going to stay home or do something else, if you're soft like me these days anyway. So I realized that the temperature had affected the ammunition and the rifle. Okay. It affects the shooter as well, that part of the system. But the big effects here are the ammunition was not performing like it was the previous day in the warmer conditions, and the rifle was not performing like it was the previous day in the warmer conditions, which tells me now, okay, I need a larger gas port. So I have enough gas to cycle the action of this rifle in these cold conditions where the ammunition has been cold soaked. I don't have a suppressor on the gun. I'm shooting a match. And at the time, suppressors in matches were not a thing. And really, there was kind of a surge where they were. And now there's really, everybody's moved away from them again, or at least largely. So now I have, a larger gas port in this barrel, and the rifle will cycle this match ammunition in, those colder conditions. And then when summertime rolls around, and it's, I'm in Tennessee, it's like 99 degrees with 7,000% humidity in the summertime. Now the gun is overgassed.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. So, and don't even think about putting a suppressor on it at that point. So now I realize, okay, I need an adjustable gas block. Okay. So I can have my cake and eat it too, where I've got a big enough gas port for these cold, worst case scenario conditions. The four horsemen of death for an AR: cold weather, dirty gun, no suppressor, and the cold soaked ammunition. So those things together really are just like the worst case scenario. It affects the lubricants you're using in the gun, and the metal parts, all this stuff. Anyway, I went through the next year and a half or so with all of these adjustable gas blocks. Everything that was on the market at the time, I tried it, and I broke all of them. They all failed somehow. So I got, through this is a years long process. I got through this, and I said, I know what this weapon has to do in the worst conditions where reliability is key. You cannot accept less than 100% reliability, okay, to the extent mechanically possible. Combine that perspective from the military service of got to have this weapon to stay alive, with these experiences I had in the competition world now, with my experiences on the OEM side and the manufacturing of parts for these rifles and all the back end pieces, and put all of this together. And I said, okay, this is America's longest serving, most successful military rifle ever. We must have a military grade, a no BS, reliable, adjustable gas system for this rifle, so that we can have that reliability in the extreme cold conditions with a dirty gun, no suppressor, or in 130 degrees in the Middle East with, and this is all actually at the same time, or this process was happening as the new ammunition, several different types of new ammunition was being introduced. The M85A1, 855A1, which is a higher pressure round, and the brown tip and all this other stuff, Mark 262. So in recognition of all of these variables, the conclusion was you've got to have an adjustable gas system on a gas operated rifle if you want to have reliable performance in all conditions and all configurations. And that's what started this process that led to Riflespeed gas controls and the really tremendous success we've had with these, where these things are now all over the world, and military units, military shooters at the very highest levels, any unit in the world, using these with excellent results. And to this day, I've never had any reports of a customer being able to damage or destroy a gas control through, even abuse, really. I mean, not just normal use, but I'm a hardcore pessimist and a consumer advocate as far as my perspective on being in the firearms industry, where I say it's got to work. It's got to work always. It's got to work every time. Nothing else is acceptable. Even though that level of perfection may not be truly attainable, that's the goal. Okay.
Mhm.
We cannot let the customer down when he's exchanged his time, money, and effort for the product that we have promised him is going to solve his problem. So
Sam's smiling like an idiot when you say no one has yet damaged or destroyed one of our systems, and Sam just starts.
He
grinning
takes
like
that
an
as a
idiot.
personal
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah,
Man, please do.
absolutely.
Look, I'll tell you a story about that too. Before we went to market, I set criteria where we said, okay, gas controls have to pass these tests. Okay. If they'll meet these thresholds, okay, we had objectives and we had thresholds, going back to terminology from my time developing weapons for the military. And if we meet the thresholds, we'll go to market. And if we meet the objectives, that's icing. And it's, that's what we want, is kind of the best case scenario there, where we hit everything we want, not just the things everything we want, not just the things we need.
Mm-hmm.
And we have attempted to destroy, we went through probably a dozen different units and different types of destructive testing, and we'll cut them apart after a certain amount of rounds and, look and see what's changed on the inside. What does the parts wear look like? Material selection was guided by that process quite a bit, where we found that materials that the industry tells us are the right choice for this would fail almost immediately. If you look at a lot of your suppressor mounts and your muzzle devices, you'll see that a lot of those are 17-4 stainless steel. Well, the very first plungers that we made for the gas controls during this process were 17-4 H900 hard heat treat, the better grade. I say better grade, I'm a layman, so engineers and metallurgists and all are machinists are probably screaming at their computer right now.
The light twitch.
Yeah. So they died within like less than 300 rounds, because when that material reaches a certain temperature, the properties that are desirable really cease to exist. And we exceeded those temperatures, very quickly during our destructive testing. So material selection was guided by this process. And we got to the point where the last destructive test gas control assembly that we beat up, attempting to destroy it, that was the point of this, was to destroy this, to determine the point where failure occurs. When we passed, I'm going from memory, it was somewhere north of 14,000 rounds on it. The threshold was 10,000, because by that time Now, this has changed a little bit, but at this point, this is several years ago, 6 to 10,000 rounds, most barrels are going to be shot at or gone. We were keyholing barrels and blowing barrels out well before that during all this process. Some of the times now, some of the technologies are different materials and hammer forging and the surface treatments. You can get a little better life than that out of some of those now on a carbide barrel I'm talking about. But that exact gas control, after we, passed the threshold and objective requirements for durability, we said, okay, that's the green light. We're going to go to market with this, but we're still going to continue to try to destroy this unit because I want to know what it's going to take to destroy it. So we loaned this to the local SWAT team for about 6 months, and they put thousands of rounds on it, got it back, still going strong. And I sent that exact same unit with no parts replacement to Adam Johnson at the NFA Review channel. If you guys watch his channel on YouTube, he does suppressor tests and reviews and all this on there. Well, he has a full auto lower for his AR where he just does, mag dump, full auto, suppressor testing, heat these things up. And he's had that exact same unit that left here with, somewhere south of 20,000 rounds on it, I think, for over 2 years now, shooting it on his full auto. And to this day, I still can't get it back from him to cut it open to see what it looks like in there because he says it's still going strong. I'm just going to keep shooting it. I'm going to keep going until it dies. And he's not killed it yet. So I don't know what it's going to take to kill one of these things. So if you can do it, then, I'm glad I don't have your ammo kill.
How much 300 Win Mag can you get hold of?
Yeah, that's a good question. Now, the good thing about that, boy, I'm going to nerd out if we keep going on these little rabbit trails here. This is great.
Go ahead.
The good thing about that is with a 3-in Win Mag, your gas system is generally going to be a much longer length, rifle length, rifle plus 1, rifle plus 2, than it would be on, something like a 10.5-inch 5.56 or anything like that. So even though the volume of gas is going to be greater, the pressure at the port is likely to be lower than it would be on some configurations with a 5.56.
That's true. You're further down that burn
Right.
curve, that pressure curve.
Yeah, the pressure falls off pretty precipitously as the bullet travels down the bore farther away from the chamber into the barrel where the peak is going to occur.
I recall
that port pressure, is one of those things. I mean, and the gun manufacturers know this. They have to position those ports where that pressure is within a certain range to cycle the gun.
Right. I mean, I recall trying to suppress a 14.5 carbine length, and I was using an adjustable gas system, and I could not make it sound good.
Yeah.
No matter how much I tried.
I was wondering what you were doing.
I knew exactly what you were doing.
He's shutting the camera off so YouTube doesn't try and strike me for
It's
handling
a wall, I swear.
Yep. And I think what you'd find there, because if the noise was not changing, that you may be affecting the noise at the suppressor, at the end of that suppressor, but you're not affecting the noise at the port, the ejection port.
Right.
That's where your noise is coming from.
You got too much dwell time there to really affect how much port pop you're going to have, or ejection port noise, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, you can only delay unlocking so long and have the gun still cycle.
Yeah. So no, that's my 300 Win Mag, and it's rifle length gas system.
Nice.
So by that time, your pressure's gone down significantly compared to a carbine length. My only thing looking at them is, especially with the extended ones, with like your little your grippy portion,
the control knob.
Yeah, there you go. I'm just wondering. I wonder how hard I'd have to shove that into a hill to get it jammed up full of dirt.
Yeah, it's pretty well under the handguard. I mean, that's really not been an issue. That's a common question we get, but it's so far under the handguard in most applications that if you get that much dirt stuffed inside your handguard, you've really done something wrong.
I've got bigger problems.
Don't pull the trigger.
Yeah, don't pull the trigger.
No, that's where you just do the whole. You hold it out and turn your head and squeeze.
Yeah. Call your buddy that you don't really like over and say, "Hey, can you shoot this and see what's going on?"
Hey, Mike, can you come shoot my rifle for me?
No.
Now, if you want to test, you get an 80-pound bag of concrete, and you just seal the entire front half of the rifle in it, and then and then pull the trigger with a string and see what happens.
It's still going to go boom once.
So it's going to go boom in a certain direction, yes.
Yeah.
It's an effective noisemaker at that point.
Yeah. And, honestly, I did not even know that 300 when I had seen the Nemo guns, I guess, but like the 300 WSM, I like a 300 WSM. I've got a couple elk rifles and 300 WSM. I didn't even know that 300 WSM in an AR was a thing until a customer sent me some pictures of the rifle he built with a gas control on it. It was basically, hey, this is what I built. I love your gas control. It's the first thing I found that will actually work on this rifle and not, just die immediately, not have the guts just blow out of it. And it was a 20 or 22 inch 300 WSM, really good looking gun. And I thought that's the coolest thing ever. I've got a couple of bolt actions elk rifles, as I said, in 300 WSM. And that has been on my to-do list for almost 2.5 or 3 years now. Still haven't done it, but it's on the list.
Yeah, 300 WSM it's a wicked little cartridge.
Oh yeah.
That would be on my list of things to do too. The problem is my list of things to do is about yay wide, so
Yep,
it's nowhere near the top.
Yeah,
Sam,
and no matter how many things I check off of that list, it never gets shorter.
Oh no, it just gets longer.
Sam, do you want to tell them about that rifle? Exactly what it is?
That one up there.
Yeah, that one.
Okay, it's Great Lakes Firearms and Ammo, 300 Winchester Magnum, long action AR, but somehow not somehow not being like the Omen though, where they basically opened up the entire side of the upper receiver to shove a charging handle in. So
it's similar in concept to the Ruger SFAR that they managed to get a little bit more length out of an AR-10 sized action.
Yeah. I still need to put it through its paces a bit. It's functioned. Actually, I haven't put a whole ton of rounds through it yet. I've got child number 3 on the way here in about a week and a half. So I have not had time to go to the range in ages.
Yeah.
And I'm not about to have time to go to the range either.
Right.
So I have had time to run through a little bit. I've put mine like 80 or 100 rounds through mine.
You have a 3. Yeah, he has a 30-06 though.
Yes, I have the same rifle in 30-06 because I always wanted a 30-06 AR, so I have a 30-06 AR.
There you go.
I drew the duck blue because I wanted to see a blue duck.
You're the weirdest little FUD man I've ever met. You have the option for 300 Win Mag or 7mm rim mag, and you're like, nah, 30-06 will do.
I can get another one.
It's like Steve Rogers finds an AR-15. It's like, I want it this way.
So it's definitely sub MOA. And at 400 yards, Sam, it was just banging away at the deer size steel that was sitting out there. I don't have any info on where it was hitting or how the scope was doing or anything like that.
Well,
than I would point it at the deer and bang, I would get a...
I'll say I was spotting for you. You were hitting roughly, at least if you were telling me truthfully where you were aiming, you were hitting, right in there. We would have taken it out farther, but we ran out of daylight. So
yeah, I was aiming dead shoulder area. So if I was hitting dead shoulder area, then that's...
You're right in there. You're in the mailbox.
Pretty solid.
So Kyle, I have a question relating to my specific type of guntism.
Okay.
I like the 14.5 pin and welds because I like my suppressor mounts on a little bit shorter gun.
Yeah.
I noticed you sell rebuild kits on the website, and I kind of looked at the recommended schedule of changing out, the internal parts. But if something were to go wrong with one of those, would you be able to service it without removing the pinned and welded muzzle device?
Good question. We get that one frequently. And if you refer to our technical documents page, you'll see the maintenance instructions, which are very much like the giant owner's manual that's under the seat of your truck that nobody ever reads.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we have maintenance intervals of, every day you go to the range, do this, once every so many rounds, do this. Nobody's ever going to do that. I never do that. We don't ever do that with our fleet guns we do our demos with. Literally the only maintenance that is ever required for one of these is put a single drop of oil on the plunger where it enters the plunger channel, and then put the gun in the corner, in the trunk, in the safe, or whatever. And that oil will creep its way into the insides of your gas control and do all of the maintenance that you'll ever need to do to it. The service life of your gas control exceeds the service life of your barrel and your bolt. So if it's time to do anything to your gas control, it's because you're replacing a barrel or bolt and you're rebuilding the gun anyway. So that pin and weld muzzle device can go ahead and come off, and you'll put that on your next gun if it's still in good enough condition. Keep the gas control. It's still perfectly fine. And with the rebuild kit that you mentioned, which I think we sell for like 20 something bucks, that has everything you need to install the same gas control on a new barrel with new screws, new spring pins for both your cross pin for your barrel and the pin for your gas tube, and a new plunger. Okay, those are kind of the and a new spring. Those are the replacement and wear parts. The plunger is probably going to be fine unless you're shooting all full auto. Maybe you want to replace it. But this is one of those preventive maintenance things where I say replace the spring in the plunger at least when you do this. And that gas control can really survive almost indefinitely if you'll do those things.
Awesome.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, and that really goes back to, what we talked about earlier, where I don't know what the actual service life is because we've never been able to find it.
Oh, that's a good thing.
Yeah, going back a little bit, I've had a couple of times where just the concept of being able to easily adjust on the fly if you have to, or just realizing something's not quite right and adjusting for environmental conditions, or say somehow you didn't get it lubed up correctly, and it's just dry and you're using new parts and it's just not working right.
God,
I've had a
nobody
couple of
likes it when
times.
it's not. You just try to go in dry. It's not lubed up. Like, oh,
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
just
it's
awful
just
Who does that?
for someone.
Awful, just like
for
that.
someone.
I've had a couple of times where I could have used something like that. One was actually this last January at a match. I was playing with my Legos, moving stuff around, and I thought, and I had actually sighted in with a different suppressor on the rifle that I wanted to use, and I went out and shot a little bit, and like, okay, that's fine. Gas, I checked gas, everything was good, and I got to stage 1, and I guess putting a little more volume through the gun, I started to get gassed really hard. And I'd actually learned from a previous incident where I had zip tied the Allen wrench to the handguard so I could actually adjust it that day, which took a little bit of time because I had to take it off and do it and put it back. And that worked out okay. But the time before, I had gone to a buddy's after playing with my Legos and figured, okay, this will be fine. It's an H3 buffer with the same spring weight. It should all work fine. And I get there and we're shooting targets behind his house, and my rifle is basically a bolt action. It's ejecting, but it's only grabbing the next round about a third of the time. And I put mine down because I got tired of that. And we're standing out there and he's shooting, and I notice movement out in the field. And I realized running left to right, straight towards our line of fire, is 3 coyotes. Just, I'm like, dang. So I grabbed the rifle and I loaded up, and long story short, we got no coyotes. And at least once I had the crosshairs on fur, and I pressed the trigger and it got a click. And I didn't have any way to adjust it with me that day. So yeah, I was not happy about it.
Aw. That sucks.
Yeah, it seems like such a no-brainer that, if you have some adjustable part of your firearm, that it should have a way to adjust it without you having to zip tie a tool to the side of your gun. I mean, to me, that's like saying, okay, I've got a truck with a manual transmission, but the lever for the gear shifter is, at home in the garage, and here I am running around town with no way to shift. That doesn't make any sense,
You only need second gear.
That's why I park on hills.
Well, that's so. It's actually, we don't get this as much, but when Riflespeed first launched, the gas controls are quite a bit more expensive than some of your adjustable gas blocks, a little bit more expensive than some. I think, like the Noveski is like $190 or something. And, we're right at 200. And when we first launched this thing, that was a common complaint was, well, I can get this other thing, with a set screw for like $90 or whatever. That's fine. They're acceptable for some applications. But the very first time that same guy who's complaining about, having to spend an extra $100 or so on hours, the very first time he spends the only Saturday morning he's going to have to go to the range that month, loading up all of his gear, driving half an hour, 45 minutes to the range, like I used to have to, unloading all of his gear, setting up targets, loading up his mags, getting behind the gun, and fires that first shot only to realize that his gas system is adjusted wrong, for his ammo, for his can, or whatever, for the conditions. And he forgot that damn little wrench. The very first time that happens, and he has to pack all of that stuff up and go home because his gun doesn't work, the extra cost of the gas control completely ceases to be an issue, and he's ordering one that day.
Yeah, I went and
Just
bought
because it's
4
so
extra
convenient.
wrenches and distributed them places.
It could
That was
be
my
me.
solution.
He
Yeah.
could be like me and just forget his ammo that day. That's happened twice.
Oh. Didn't have an issue cycling.
No issues cycling. Everything dry fired just fine.
Went pheasant
I just
hunting
went
again with my dad on Saturday. I almost forgot to bring the shotgun. I was like, all right, got everything. Ammo, backpack,
I can see that.
child, hat, vest. What am I missing? And I went upstairs and I had to get in the safe or something. I was like, oh, God damn it.
Kyle, are y'all still making upper assemblies?
We do have complete uppers. We've got everything from a 10.3 or 10.5 up to we've got 18s. We may have some 20s left, but that 10.5 to 18 is really the core. And honestly, this is a surprise. Now, you guys may see this as really obvious, but the surprise to me was that the 12.5s are, by a pretty good measure, the best seller. And the 12.5 is just really not on anybody's radar from what I can see, or at least until we started this deal. I've always liked, like the 10.3 or 10.5, real short gun for home defense, let's say, or CQB type stuff, and then a 16 to 18 inch gun for the field. But I kind of had to start looking into this myself when I saw these sales numbers for the 12.5s, and I've built a couple now, and it is really a good, handy, kind of all around size that you can put an LPV on and be appropriate, and you can shoot. I was doing it today, in fact, shooting a little bit longer distance, and yet you can still put it in the truck and run around the house or whatever with it, and it's a good all around size. But we do have complete uppers. We have several companies now, and this has been going on for a little more than a year or so now. But we've got quite a few of the OEMs that are starting to incorporate the gas controls onto their complete guns and complete uppers.
That's handy.
Yeah, I think at SHOT Show this year, we had Agency Arms announced a new line of rifles, and they're going to have, of course, their uppers as well. They've got a unique model, kind of a proprietary model gas control we did for them that's really sweet. GA Precision, if you guys are into the whole precision world, competition match rifle world, those guys are big there. They're putting gas controls on their gas guns now. And they I got to look at those guns at SHOT Show, and they are just fantastic. Spikes Tactical, I think, was the first one. They've been doing some special run stuff with our gas controls on there for some time. Argos Ordnance, a smaller company, I think Chad Sims of IV8888 YouTube channel fame, started that company and seems to be doing really well with it. He's got complete guns, I think uppers with gas controls on there. And then there are a couple, actually have had 2 conversations with some bigger names in the industry we're not quite ready to talk about yet. They're going to be launching multiple models of guns and uppers with gas controls on there as well. So in addition to the, let's say, semi-custom uppers that we do, we're also going to be adding those factory offerings from these other companies that are using our system onto the Riflespeed site as well. So you'll have options there where, if you want to, and I understand, Riflespeed's still a young company. A lot of people, most people, I would say, even in our core market at this point, still may not even know we exist, but they know about, some of these bigger name manufacturers. So having their products on our site with the gas control, I think will be a plus for us and for those customers as well who want that reassurance of a more known name.
Yeah, that's a big vote of confidence.
Yeah, I've known George at GA Precision for a number of years from shooting matches, across the country together. Great guy. They have a really good team there, and they're new. I think he's their operations manager, general manager. Really sharp guy that has kind of spearheaded this thing. They've got a gas gun specialist there that was involved in the process as well, of course. But they have such a nice rifle, and the agency rifle that they had at SHOT Show this year. I have to say, I've already told them, you go ahead and just set aside a few of those for Kyle, because I'm going to have those for my personal collection as well. Really, really going to be nice. And the other things that I can't quite talk about yet are super exciting as well. And we've got guns that in fact, this month we've shipped quite a few assemblies to one of the biggest names in the industry for some overseas military contract guns, and as those things start to pop out and people see that, that's going to help us as well, as far as people recognizing, one, Riflespeed, and two, the fact that being attached to, these established, well-known companies, firearms, will, I think, help a lot of people get over the, I'm not going to spend the $200 with this company I've never heard of thing, which is totally understandable.
Yeah, GA Precision makes that. What do they call it? It's the little guy. Gladius.
Yeah,
that's a good looking rifle right there.
Yeah, they've got the Gladius and the Templar and the Crusader and a bunch of nice stuff. In fact, my all-time favorite bolt action rifle is a Gap 260 that I've had for probably 15 years now, and it's one of those where it's not really good at anything, but it's so good at everything that I will grab that rifle almost 100% of the time, even when I know I may have one that, for this one thing might be better. And it's just such a great rifle. They really do a good job up there.
Yeah.
I notice a lot of Midwest Industries stuff on your website, like the taper mounts and things. I like the taper mounts.
So Midwest Industries, if a guy goes to our site and looks at some of the build parts, or even some of the complete uppers, but I think some of the build parts that we offer on there, one of the questions that comes up is, will your gas control fit under, my handguard? And the reason that question exists is because the form factor of the gas control is slightly larger than what we would consider kind of a standard, like a fixed low profile gas block. If you look at like the Mark 12 SPR Crane gas block, for example, and I'm going to butcher it because I don't know that I remember all the numbers off the top of my head, but the weight on it was like 1.8 ounces, I think. And I can't recall the width of it now, but anyway, ours is a little bit wider. We also use a straight gas tube rather than the more traditional, or what we think of as traditional, even though the straight gas tube, I think, was the OG. The bent gas tube. It's got a couple of bends in it.
Mm-hmm.
And we do that for several reasons. And all of it, and I won't get too in the weeds on that, but all of it ties back into that goal of durability for this to be a truly military grade system. So if you look at gas tube failures, they happen at those bends.
Yep.
Well, if you look at the adjustable gas blocks that preceded Riflespeed gas controls, that have, the set screw, let's say, where the adjuster is a set screw in the front of that gas block. They have a form factor of a low profile fixed gas block that is then drilled and tapped for a set screw, and that provides the occlusion of the gas flow into the gas tube which feeds the rifle's action. When you take a low profile gas block, something with that form factor, that size, and you put a third hole. So you've got the primary bore where the gas block mounts onto the barrel. Okay. Generally, let's just say a 750 diameter barrel. You got a large 750 diameter hole there. And then you've got, I think it's 180 or 181 thou hole for the gas tube. All right. Well, in between those two holes on a fixed gas block, it's going to be, solid metal. But with a set screw type adjustable gas block, you're adding another hole into that limited space, basically. And you end up with very thin walls between those three holes. So, and I'm talking about three holes, and there's so many opportunities there that we're just not going to explore to keep this family friendly.
I was just waiting for Mike to say something.
I know, it's so good.
He didn't just jump all over it.
Oh, I think he was muted.
Well, I was thinking about 3 holes, and I was like, well, 1, 2, but that doesn't, maybe 3 fingers, 2 holes, but not 3 holes. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and if you go with the third hole, you're looking at, felony time there. So that's a whole nother issue there when you're talking about guns. But this third hole is in between the gas tube and the barrel on a fixed profile, let's say, adjustable gas block. You end up with a very thin metal wall in between at least 2 of those holes. And then you exacerbate that with the fact that you've got a sharp V-shaped thread in that hole. And you end up with, in some cases, a wall thickness of like 15 to 17 thousandths of an inch. It's almost nothing. There's almost no metal there.
Yeah.
And so what will sometimes happen is, as this mechanism is heat cycled, hot, cold, parts expand and contract. Now, this is not as much of an issue, I think, as it used to be with some of the earlier set screw type adjustables, though it still can be. But you get embrittlement of that screw, which typically is just a screw. It's not any kind of, fancy special metal that is really intended to survive in this application. So you end up with cracks in those very thin walls where, the heat cycling and the embrittlement, all this that takes place, differential heating and cooling. So you can have a failure point there. As much as I said I wasn't going to get down into the weeds on this, I just did. But the short version is we add more material, which helps increase the durability and longevity of the system. That requires us to use a straight gas tube because the top of the gas control is taller than the top of a fixed low profile gas block. So as a result, there are a very small number of handguards that are not made for the taller body of a gas control, or not, I shouldn't say not made for, but there may be interference issues, fitment issues with those. Mm-hmm. A cylindrical handguard like the old carbon fiber PRIs, if it's a cylindrical handguard, it does not have that kind of inverted keyhole shape that most handguards have where your gas tube rides.
Right. I have a YHM right here that the cutout for the barrel does not have any kind of intrusion into the pick rail area for a gas block or anything like that. You have to have a low profile gas block to make it work. But I also have a couple of Midwest Industries ones, which actually I think I have one right here that has, that nice cutout up around the pick rail that gives you a little bit more room to work there.
Yeah, and that's the most common configuration is you've got, that inverted keyhole shape, because if you look at it, what we have with a straight gas tube at the back of the barrel end where the gas tube enters the receiver is exactly the same as, like on a bent gas tube. That's the height where the gas tube interfaces with the receiver. The difference is on the front end, or, so let's say out towards the gas block itself. That's where the difference is going to be. So there are some handguards like the Aero Atlas R1 that has a lowered center section where if your gas block or your gas control is buried well under the middle of that handguard, you're going to have some fitment issues. If it's closer out to the end, they'll actually machine like the last, 2 or 3 inches of the top part of this handguard. I think they do it for looks, but there's really no functional reason for it in most cases. But if your gas control is in that machined out portion at the end of the handguard, you're perfectly fine. The Atlas S1 is the one that does not have a top pick rail, and it's radically cut down low to allow you to wrap your hand over the handguard in a smaller diameter. That one has just fit my problems in almost every configuration that I'm aware of. But those two and the cylindrical handguard that I mentioned earlier, and there are some cylindrical handguards that works. The Apex is an offset cylindrical design, works fine. That was actually my go-to handguard for a number of years. And then I think there's one that has like a built-in bipod or something. The newer versions of that, from what I understand, will work now. I think they've done some modifications to it so that it works for the gas control. The earlier versions did not, as I understand it. I don't own one of those. But almost every other handguard on the market is, perfectly fine from a fitment standpoint. But the Midwest Industries that we offer and the cross machine tool handguards that we offer, to me, are kind of the sweet spot of performance and value. I have a number of builds with, much more expensive, the Geisley handguards, whatnot, that are great. But I think for most people, and the sales numbers, Jeff Cross at Cross Machine Tool is a neighbor. He's right down the road from me here, and he's a good friend. And their sales numbers would kind of back this up, that for the majority of applications, that kind of mid-range handguard where you've got excellent quality, but maybe you don't have all the bells and whistles of, like the steel inserts for your QD or, some of the scalloping for cosmetics or whatever. Mm-hmm. That mid-range kind of handguard, like what you see from a lot of the Midwest options and Cross Machine Tool, the HDM or DRT series, those are just such tremendous values that we offer a lot of those. So that's why you see those on the site and on our uppers, complete uppers.
Very nice.
Yeah, that DRT is, if I'm going to build a gun for personal use, that Cross DRT is, if it's not my favorite, it's really close. He's got such a cool thing going where you kind of take that 50 Shades of FDE thing that some people love and some people hate. Mm-hmm. Well, Jeff has kind of specced out a color that's a little more on the bronze, coppery end of the spectrum, and it looks so awesome. I love it.
Yeah, I like the Midwest handguards. I've gotten to like the combat rails.
Yes, I love those.
Yeah. I've made a commitment to myself to never buy a handguard again that I have to time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's not fun, and I dislike it.
Yeah, it's just, we've gone so far past that, and with the anti-rotation features that are built into either the upper or the handguard or both now, there's really no reason for it. And that combat rail that you mentioned, that and the G4, I like both of those. But the combat rail actually is on, it's my number one go-to rifle right now. It's got an OD green combat rail on it back before COVID, when you can actually get all their Cerakote options that they used to have. Excellent choice. Really like that one. And, you were mentioning earlier about how you're shooting a gun, maybe you need more lube or something changed or whatever. Talking about this handguard and that gun got me to thinking about this. I took that rifle to one of Greenline Tactical's night vision courses. I guess this was February before last, a couple of years ago now. And I think we shot somewhere around 900 rounds, or I was a little heavy on the trigger. Maybe I shot about 900 rounds. I don't know that the course calls for that many. And so halfway through that second night, I think if anything, maybe I'd put a couple of drops of oil on there when I got done, the first night or whatever. It's like 3:00 in the morning. I'm ready to be done. I'm not cleaning guns, So halfway through the next night, we're out there and you can feel the gun, the speed of the reciprocating assembly. When you're comfortable with the gun, it, you shot it enough and you're paying attention, you can feel it slow down. Like you can feel a malfunction. You can feel the bolt lock back on an empty magazine. You can feel all these things. Mm-hmm. But we're shooting, drills and going through this, and I can feel the gun slowing down. And all I do is reach up to the gas control and turn it up one click. And now the gun is running just like it's supposed to again for the rest of the night. I didn't have to clean it or oil it or do anything to it. And it was very nice to have that option.
Yeah, that's nice because I know exactly what you're talking about on high round counts. And yeah, sure enough, it starts feeling a little more like ka-chunk, ka-chunk,
Mm-hmm.
ka-chunk. Yeah. And the next thing you know, I had a double feed while doing a 2-man bounding drill. And so he had a jam, I had a double feed, and then
All right.
okay, I guess we'll just go to handgun time then.
That's good times there.
I then ran out of handgun.
Find some cover.
Him to get back up, and then it's like I guess he still wasn't up. So it's like, well, I guess I just got to fix the rifle now.
Yeah. Well, the most obvious use case for this thing, what I've kind of determined over the last few years of doing this is you've got like the easiest step for us to take when reaching people and finding people who kind of recognize the value of this, because a lot of guys, and there's nothing wrong with this, we're all kind of in different stages of our growth and experience as shooters. And some people just are recreational shooters and that's all they want to be. And that's fine too. But if you get a guy who has an AR with a suppressor and night vision, if you've gotten to that point, you probably have enough experience with what you're doing that you recognize the value of an adjustable gas system. And, that guy that sees a gas control just right away is going to recognize the value of it. He's probably already been through a few of these adjustables with the little set screws and the wrenches and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of the no-brainer for him. But another use case that, kind of taking really a different approach, a different application for the firearm is like your precision marksman or your DMR, SPR, whatever you want to call it. Because if you've got an adjustable gas system on your gun, you can dial down the reciprocating speed, the cycling rate of your gun such that recoil is reduced to very little. Mm-hmm. And we've got a guy who was an early adopter. He was like one of the first orders that came in, I think, when we launched Riflespeed several years ago, is a deputy up in Wisconsin, I believe. And he's got some cool videos on Instagram where he built, I think real quick, he built a 308 and a 6.5 Creedmoor with gas controls on there. And he's got videos shooting that gun where, this is a large frame gun with a big, heavy reciprocating assembly. And the gun just doesn't move when he shoots it. And he's getting multiple shots off on a steel target before the first shot ever gets there. And he's able to watch the target and his impacts the entire time through the scope because all of the recoil is gone. And he has no aiming disruption when he fires this gun, which if you shot a lot of the large frame guns, is kind of a big thing because they move a lot. The Ruger S4 you talked about earlier. I started seeing these videos come out where guys were putting the Riflespeed gas control on their S4 and kind of solving all their problems. And I'm like, well, I got to see what's going on. And I bought one of these guns. And man, it was kind of brutal, honestly. You turn the gas on that thing wide open, it's pretty rough. But you can dial it down until it's very nice.
That one's almost too small for its own good.
That still
it
uses
really is on that line.
That still uses AR-15 buffers, correct?
Mm-hmm. Buffer tube. And then you've got, and somebody's going to be able to correct me here. I believe the bolt carrier, it's the same length. I know it only has one screw on the carrier key where they had to reduce the length of that, but it's really squashed down and compact.
Right.
Yeah, that sounds right to me.
I like the gun a lot, but you're right. It's on the ragged edge of almost too much of a good thing.
Now, I have a question, kind of turn this to hunting. So if you're going to shoot a suppressed 300 blackout subsonics, can you use this to turn the gas off so you have the quietest setup possible?
Yes, that is. It's actually died down a little bit, probably the last 6 months or so. But for about the first 2 years that we did this, that was very literally the number one question that we got over and over and over. And I love the blackout. I shoot blackout quite a bit. Love shooting subs. And I was even surprised at how often we got that question. And the answer is yes in most configurations. I've actually got a customer I'm dealing with now, and he has a carbine length gas system on his 300 blackout. And with subsonic ammo, he has all kinds of problems. Okay, because a carbine length gas system on a blackout with subs, maybe it's going to work, probably not.
That's the long gas system for 300 blackout, basically.
It is, yeah. Mostly you're going to find pistol length gas systems. In some cases, you'll even have a micro. But the pistol, there are negatives that come with a pistol length gas system on a blackout if you're going to shoot supers, particularly suppressed, if you don't have an adjustable gas system on it. Short answer is yes. However, I need to caveat that if you've got like a carbine length gas system, there are some other configurations where you're going to have trouble with that, particularly if you try to do so without a suppressor. Now, to me, shooting subs without a suppressor really doesn't make all that much sense. So, if I'm tuning the gun, maybe I don't worry about that part of it as much. But I understand the desire for it to work with any configuration, any ammo, and all that. The problem we see that is, not something that, you as the shooter or customer can have any input on really, other than your purchasing decisions. It's not anything that I, as the gas system manufacturer, can really affect, is the tremendous variability in the port pressure and resulting performance of your 300 blackout subsonic ammo. It is all over the place. We have a pretty significant library of different types of ammo here that we use for R&D purposes. And you'll have, some subsonic blackout ammo, where it's going to shoot 890 feet per second, but it cycles perfectly fine. And you've got some that shoot 1,050 feet per second that won't cycle at all. And, everything in between. And it's just pressure curves and timing of port pressure and a lot of things going on there. And it is a little bit of a tricky animal to as a customer, let's say commercial market customer, who just kind of has to, in a lot of cases, take what we can get as far as ammo goes, particularly over the last several years where it's just not been available. That can really be a tall order. But in most cases where, you've got pistol length gas system, reasonable quality barrel, and there's some other issues there we can talk about on 300 blackout barrels over the last couple of years. Yes, you can do that where you have what is essentially like a bolt action 300 blackout, and then you dial your gas back up and it cycles again, like you would want your AR to. I think AP 2020 Outdoors on YouTube has a video on this where he shows that, where he dials this gas down. He may have a couple of them where he dials this gas down to shoot subs single shot like that.
Yeah, I understand the whole burn curves and how that may affect function and whether or not it's supersonic, or even with your factory ammunition, like what barrel length it was tested with and whether or not it's intended for gas guns or bolt guns.
Right.
Like I reload, like we're the mad scientists of the gun world.
Yeah.
Like what if I take these two and put them together?
Right. It's alive. Yeah, and the good thing is the gas controls have kind of taken away all of the negative effects of just hogging that gas port out as big as it needs to be to make it work, And with a 300 blackout with subs, there are a lot of barrels on the market where the gas port is not large enough. No matter what we do with the gas system or you do with buffers or springs or anything, even very high-end barrels. I've actually got a Noveski barrel like this, and it's one of my favorite 300 blackouts. But the port on that gun is not large enough to allow reliable cycling with subsonic ammunition unless you have a suppressor attached to it. So we get all these questions, and I kind of have to go through an education process in some cases to help customers understand that what they're trying to accomplish may be a little more difficult than they think it should be in some cases, but we can usually get there.
Right. It's part of a system. It's not just another part you put on there.
Right. And a lot of times we have to kind of undo what's already been done, where the guy's I've got this color spring and a longer receiver extension and a longer buffer that's, got extra tungsten in it and kind of all these things where He's attempted to really use Band-Aids instead of just attacking the problem where it exists, which is at the gas port. He's attempted to do all of these other things to get his gun to run properly. And when he finally realizes, okay, I'm just going to break down and spend the money on one of these damned expensive gas controls, we kind of have to peel back some of those layers and say, okay, put the standard carbine spring back in it. We're going to put just a regular H buffer in it, and let's work on the gas on this gun. And we can get, 99% of the way there. And then maybe instead of an H, you want an H2, or instead of an H2, you want an H1 or whatever. We can do all that. But, I'll have people a lot of times who are in the process of kind of planning their build. And, they're saying, well, I'm going to, get, this captured buffer spring and this whatever. And we kind of have to pump the brakes and say, let's start with the real solution, which is addressing the gas where it enters the action of the gun, which is essentially through the gas tube. The use of a heavier buffer and all that, we're talking such a small change in most cases where, and you only need milliseconds to delay that unlocking in some configurations. But the difference between the performance of a gun with an H buffer or an H2 or an H3 is not as much as people think it is. That's really kind of fine tuning. And if we can, talk to somebody about their rifle configuration and say, look, do most of your work with the gas system. And then if you still got, let's say, a little bit of extra gas, if you've got a high back pressure can, you dial the gas down as far as it'll go, you've got good cycling, but you still have just a little bit of gas escaping, from that pressurized receiver on a direct gas AR, go from an H to an H2. You, in fact, almost never need to go heavier than that. You can, but you can really get things running well by doing most of your work with the gas system.
Well, I think we have fleshed out that topic quite a bit, but Kyle, I understand that you're quite a big elk hunter. So I'm going to turn a lot of this over to these three guys who do a lot of elk hunting up there in Colorado.
What advice do you have for brand new archery elk hunters, aka potential crossbow hunters?
All right, so I'm glad you asked. I'm really going to get on a tear now. This is fun. I started elk hunting in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still, with 10 years now, and I've not been able to go every year. So I'm still a relatively new elk hunter. And I think that has helped me with a little bit of perspective. I dove in so hard when I started elk hunting. I mean, I got the bug to such a degree. That was all I could think about every, minute I could get. Kids are in bed, or I've got a few minutes here. I'm doing research and studying and learning and practicing my calls during the day in the truck, all of that. What I found was that we have so much good information and educational material that's available to us that it's overwhelming. And, if you've got the time and are willing to invest it, that's a good thing. More information is generally better. But all of the people who are providing this information, and, I'll say people like, Paul Medell or Chris Rowe or Corey Jacobson, these guys are kind of the, at least from what I've seen, the bigger names in that elk educational world. They're all tremendously experienced, tremendously successful Western hunters who live in elk country, get to go, all the time. Well, their perspective is different than mine as a guy who has only been elk hunting. Let's say I'm brand new or just elk hunting for a few years. And I live in Tennessee. I can't just go up to the mountains for the weekend when I get off work on Friday night and hang out with elk or whatever. So
isn't there a Tennessee elk tag?
There is a Tennessee elk tag. It is, extremely limited. It's one of those things where Tennessee and Kentucky, and I think maybe Virginia, I actually don't know about them, but that kind of Appalachian area, they have reintroduced elk and started to offer like maybe 5 tags or something like that. and I put in for it, but I have no thought that I'll ever actually draw one. That would be cool though. But it's not the same for a guy who has the ability to take off a week of work for his vacation, spend 2 days driving out there, hunt for 5 days and 2 days driving home. That guy has a totally different mission than someone who lives 45 minutes from elk camp and can go up anytime he wants to, or more often, let's say. So I went through this process of really refining and figuring out the fundamentals of how to attack an elk hunt as quickly as possible, with most of the work done before I ever left my desk. Okay. I'm doing most of this by computer, because if you're, an Eastern hunter or even a local hunter there who just has limited time, the biggest part of elk hunting is finding the elk. So you have got to put in the work to be able to find the elk before you ever get in the truck. Okay. And people will say, well, how in the world do you find the elk before you get in the truck? If you know terrain, you're able to read topo maps with fluency, like it is your native language. You study the elk's daily habits, the elk daily routine, and elk country, somewhat of a general sense. What do they eat? Where do they live? The fact that they bed on the north side. Why do they do that? All of these things, you can take just about any elk unit in the West that has elk during September, look at a topo map and say, okay, there are going to be elk here, 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 and here. Let's say you pick 10 spots. That gives you your plan of attack for this elk hunt, so that, and you prioritize these. When you get there, your first trip is, I'm going to check this area. I'm going to check this area. I'm going to check this area. And you're going to go down your list. And every time I've done this, I found elk almost immediately. In 2016, which is the year I killed that bull that I sent you pictures of, my number one spot on my scouting list that I had picked purely from a topo map and Google Earth and Onyx from my computer was a bare hilltop to the north side of a creek drainage area that was to the south of a wilderness boundary. So it was hard to get to. You had to cross water to get there. It was kind of on the edge of the accessible area for a non-resident hunter, where, this is in Wyoming, where you can't go into the wilderness area to hunt. You can go there to bird watch or camp or whatever. Anyway, so that was an area I thought, okay, this is going to have a little less pressure because, fewer people will be willing to go there and spend their time there and all this. I got to camp a day or two early. I go up the first morning to glass, sit in my tripod, put my binoculars on the tripod. The second that my eyes touch my binoculars, I'm looking at a 7-point bull in the exact spot where I said he would be from my topo and e-scouting that summer. And that's happened over and over again. I've not filled every elk tag that I've ever had, but I've killed an elk every single year I've ever been elk hunting. The years that I've had multiple elk tags, I have come extremely close to killing multiple elk more than once. But all of this, and I'll be glad to send you guys this information. You can share it with your listeners. I condensed into a list of what I think is, based on my experience, and I do not claim to be an expert, but I've put together a list of kind of the bullet points for the newer elk hunter, the inexperienced elk hunter, or honestly, some of the locals out there who just don't take it that seriously, but maybe they decide they actually want to kill a bull that, now that they've been going for 5 years and never even seen one. Pick a unit. And it is that simple. You literally say, okay, which of these units has elk in the time of year when I'm going to be there? Let's just say September for archery season, because that's my thing. Okay, there's elk in this unit in September. I can get that tag, and it's reasonably accessible, meaning, I've checked and the roads are not out or whatever. I'm done looking. I'm going to get that tag for that unit. And that part of the process, which is such a stumbling block when you're doing this from 1,000 miles away, just picking a unit is so hard for a lot of guys because they have paralysis by analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell my wife and my daughter and my mother and any other person who will go to dinner with me that seems to have a hard time picking something off the menu. When you see one thing that looks good, close the menu and order it. Okay, that's literally the process I suggest with picking an elk unit. There are elk in this unit. When I want to be there, I can get the tag, and there's accessible land. There's public land, or I've got permission on private, whatever. Most of us is public land. Stop, get that tag. Okay. You don't need to think about it any farther if you're the new guy doing this, because you have much more important things to learn than studying, the sex ratios. Well, this has got 38% bulls and this one's got 40% bulls. Doesn't matter. Does not matter. Develop topo fluencies. Number 2, when you look at a topo map, every single detail on that map should be obvious to you, just as, like, we're having a conversation right now in English, and I think everybody can understand. If we hear a word, we understand it. If you see it on a topo map, you understand what it means. You can identify which hills are north facing, which ones have water, which ones are covered in vegetation, which are not, the distance from the roads. You've got your motor vehicle use maps, which are going to come in later. Okay, these are closed. These are accessible by foot or horseback, but not by vehicle. All of those things, you've got to be able to know what you're looking at when you do your e-scouting with a topo map and your satellite imagery. I would rather have a topo than satellite imagery if I could only have one. Thankfully, we don't have to make that choice. Understanding the elk's daily routine is number 3. Cannot overemphasize how important this is. And it's so simple. Elk go down in the evening and they come up in the morning. It's all a function of thermals because they want to stay alive. They're going down to what I call nighttime congregation areas. Okay. And that's not necessarily that they're saying, hey, let's go hang out with everybody because all our friends are going to be there. It's just that when elk come down, they often end up in the same place at the bottom in these more lush, wet areas with vegetation, with the thermals coming down the mountains into those basins.
Wake up, 7:30, cup of coffee.
Chill out, check the news for a minute. Yeah, they don't get to do all that stuff, Well, they know even before it starts to switch, they're on their feet and they're up and moving in anticipation of those thermals. And they have it down to within a few minutes when this is going to happen, they know. And if you don't live and die by those winds and those thermals, that you're done. Okay. There should never be, and this is a big deal for a lot of Eastern hunters who don't understand this, because we don't have thermals here in the flatter country. Every single second that you're on your elk hunt, okay, if you're asleep in your sleeping bag, is the only time you're forgiven for this. Every single second, you're aware of what the wind is doing and what it was doing a second ago and a minute ago. Okay. You have to plan everything that you do by that wind. Mm-hmm. You're going to get to a point where you have enough experience to know what you can get away with and what you can't. But when you're new, you really have to do everything according to that wind, because that's going to make your success. You do everything else right, everything else perfectly, and the elk cooperate, let's say. And if you're not paying attention to that wind, you're going to be screwed.
Yeah, in Oklahoma, where it's nice and flat, it's like the wind has been blowing out of the north. It's blowing out of the north right now, and it will probably continue to blow out of the north for the next several days.
Right. Exactly.
You're in Oklahoma, which is south of Nebraska, and Nebraska is south of South Dakota.
Oh, man, that means we're getting
South
corn
Dakota
here.
is south of North Dakota, and it's really windy in South Dakota because North Dakota blows, Nebraska sucks, and Oklahoma's getting what's left of that.
Did you just skip Kansas altogether?
Yeah.
Kansas doesn't exist at all.
He missed the state.
But
no,
cares
floppy
about
birds
Kansas.
here.
Literally no one cares about Kansas.
But no, I'm reading what you're saying for sure, because when I was out last September, that one of those little smoke in the bottle things,
yeah,
I had that thing out every 30 seconds, like,
yep.
Because we were so this was my first year going archery elk hunting, and I went with a couple of guys who are very experienced hunters, not terribly experienced with that first archery season. And they did exactly. I mean, the guy who actually planned it is from Michigan. He did basically exactly what you said. He picked this unit. We're going to go on that unit, and he just went online and he found a big old drainage. And I mean, sure as shit, we made it 100 yards into the drainage and found some elk sign all the way up it.
Yep.
The second day we were there, got inside of 50 yards of 3 to 4 cows. That same evening, saw a good 6-point bull about 190 yards away, 120 yards away. I forget which number it was. And then the following day, my bow decided to shit the bed, so we had to call it quits. But no, I mean, exactly that terms of, we got to the point where I'm not sure if you have we probably could have come up with a better morning strategy if we were there for, we were planning on being there for like 6 days instead of 2. We got to the point where we were afraid of busting them out in the morning too much. So we were trying to catch them in the afternoon because, they were coming down for sure those afternoons and those evenings. But yeah.
Yeah, in the mornings, you really have to start out below the elk. And that's where I'm going to keep going down my list here. And I'm going to very specifically talk about this because there are steps that, like if you're coming from the east, you're a deer hunter or whatever, it gets dark, you go home. That's not the case with elk hunting at all. So there's a lot that you have to be doing after dark on an elk hunt, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. Probably the most important, I've got a list of 10 things here. This is number 5. And I would say this is, you got to do the wind, all that. But as far as, what you need to think about your mindset going into this thing and what seems to be so difficult for people who have spent their life, let's say deer hunting in the East, where you have to be as quiet as possible and as still as possible. And, if you turn your head, you're doing it in like slow motion. Not the case at all with archery elk hunting. The number one rule to me is be overly aggressive, extremely aggressive. Proximity is your best friend when it comes to calling an elk. If you hear an elk and you say, okay, that sounds like it's 300 yards away. And I'm a, middle-aged guy, not in the best shape anymore. So when I use the word run, understand that I'm talking in a general sense here. You are very literally running 200 yards towards that bugle. Okay. And then you slow down and catch your breath. If you need to locate him again, you can. Try not to. Hopefully he's still sounding off. Early in the season, that's not always the case. But you have to close the distance. You can watch, a lot of the, especially the amateurish guys on YouTube that, they're video on their elk hunt, which I'm glad they do. I enjoy watching it still. But they hear a bugle like across the canyon and they're like setting up to call this thing in from 600 yards. And okay, yes, occasionally that can work. It can. But generally speaking, that's not the best move. You're not helping yourself by doing that. So close the distance.
Yeah,
it's like dragging a lure through the water in front of a bass. So the closer you are to it, the better it's going to work.
Yeah, and you remove options, depending on what type of calling you like to do, which that's a whole nother subject. Many of the calls that we use to interface with elk, the responses that bull has to those calls completely change if you're 600 yards away or 300 yards away or 50 yards away. He has a completely different set of actions that he can choose from when you're 300 yards away versus when you're 40, 50 yards away. And, guys that hear this and have not done this think it's crazy to say that you should get within 50 yards of a bull before you call at it, because I think, well, he's going to see me or hear me, whatever. These animals are so big and so loud, just, when they're undisturbed and moving through the brush, it's not a big deal if you're making noise, especially if you're doing it in conjunction with, some calling as you're going in. Not a big deal. And it's just really a big mindset change for a lot of guys who are so focused on being still and quiet as an Eastern deer hunter. So be overly aggressive. And I always say, if you're not bumping elk by doing this, you're not being aggressive enough. I have young boys and I have to tell their mother all the time that, to an extent, they have to cross the line to know where it is. And that's the same case for an elk hunter. as you're developing experience where you kind of know how to manage these situations. If you don't cross the line and make a mistake, you don't know where the line is. Okay. And our goal is to go right up as close to that line as we can possibly get once we've developed a little bit of this experience and can do so. Proximity, again, proximity is your best friend when you're calling elk. It really is.
Busting deer and well, ducks most recently, but a couple of busted deer. I used to see my little brother creep his head up and then slowly peek and look around for the deer and then come back down. And in my noobish years, I didn't do that, and I have definitely busted herds doing that. Trying to do that with ducks, I'm not sure where I'm going wrong, but when I figure it out, I'll
It's hard to
report
do that
back.
with ducks. There's so many
Yeah.
eyes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, with deer,
Just-
you have that one doe that blows and runs off, and you're like, well, that was a nice morning. I guess I'll go
Yep.
back to camp.
Yeah, and the good thing about it is with elk, like those deer, they're probably on the neighbor's property when that happens. If the same thing happens with elk, and they're going to run a few hundred yards, and unless you just really, really like egregiously, messed up, they're going to stop and they're going to start feeding again, and they're probably still going to be bugling because half of them don't know what happened anyway. Just this one cow took off running, or a spike busted you. A lot of cases hanging at the back of the herd, so they took off into the herd with their head up at that alert posture. But most of the time you can get back on them. So, that's part of the reason. But the big thing is just be overly aggressive so you can get close. Yes, you're going to make some mistakes and bump some elk. It's okay. You're going to find them again. You already know where they are based on this, the knowledge of the habitat and the terrain, your map scouting, the daily routine. You found sign at this point. You've obviously found elk if you bumped one. It's okay. If you bump them, you can get on them again in almost every case. Now, of course, there are exceptions, and you're on the edge of the public, and they go to all this. I got that. I'm talking general rules here. I mentioned earlier about things you're supposed to do in the dark on an elk hunt. You absolutely must be out at night scouting with your bugle or your cow call, whatever you like to use, or both, at night. Now, why do I say that? Elk are in their congregation areas, as I said earlier, so they're somewhat more concentrated. You've picked these areas out on your topo and your satellite imagery as the lower lying areas with green vegetation and water. Okay, that's where the elk are going to go at night, down the hill from where they are in the daytime. That means you can get yourself in a position where you're making elk sounds to more elk in a more concentrated area. They're already more likely to be talking anyway because they're in proximity with each other. Those bulls are going to be alerting the other bulls saying, hey, I'm over here, my herd's over here, you better get away, as they're concentrated somewhat in these lower lying areas. But if you can determine where they are at night, when they're much more vocal than they are during the daytime on their own, okay, and they're going to respond to your calls more at night, they just feel they feel more secure because they typically don't have the hunting pressure during the night like they do in the day.
Yeah,
it's just easier to get a response in some cases, particularly earlier in the season, at night, especially once really the bulls start to draw their herds together, their harems together, and they feel like they have something to defend now. But if you can determine where these elk are at night with your night scouting, your night bugling, then all you have to do is look at your topo map. I mean, you've got point A now. All you have to do is look at your topo map, and you can very quickly see where point B is. Okay. Now you may have a couple of 3 options for point B, but if you find them at night, you look at your topo map and say, okay, I've got a north facing slope here with water and cover. That's a bedding area. I've got another one over here on this hillside, and I've got another one on this hillside, all within, let's say, a half a mile to 2 miles from this nighttime area. Well, now you have a plan of attack for the next day. All you have to do now is get below those elk in the morning, if you can. Typically you can. Follow those elk up. It's going to be hard to get a bull to stop and turn around to you. You can do it. I've done it. I've shot elk that way. You can intersect, get like between them and where you think they're going to go. If in some cases it's really obvious, like this is the only place that I think they're going to go to bed the next day, because this has the cover and the water, the north facing, hillside that's going to be a little bit cooler. That's where they're going to go. You can position yourself in between in some cases and ambush them that way. And you can call a bull off his line of movement a little easier than you can getting him to retreat and recover ground he's already covered. They really don't like to backtrack and do that. But it's such a big deal. And I talk to guys, and we've been, in camp and seen other hunters, and we talk to them, and they're not going out at night and they don't know where the elk are. Such a big deal to go out at night and find these things, because now you have at least, point A, you can look on your map and kind of figure out where point B is going to go, or where it's going to be, and make a plan of attack for the next day. So if I do that and I say, let's say I've got 3 or 4 north facing, wet covered areas where I think these elk might be, that's my plan of attack for the next day. I'm going to start here. I'm going to attempt to get on the elk as they travel up. But if I'm not able to do so, or if I'm not able to call a bull to me as he's moving with the harem, then I now have 4 potential bedding areas where I can go do that midday bedroom sneak, I call it, which to me is absolutely my favorite way to hunt elk. And if you get it right, it's, to me, the most exciting way you can possibly hunt elk. And this is something Corey Jacobson talks about a lot, where, he wants to, he'll call it a challenge bull. He wants to challenge this bull in his bedroom and get him, to come out to defend his harem. And if you can make that work, I don't know that there's anything in the entire North American hunting world that can compare to how awesome that is. To get into within 40 or 50 yards of, bedded group of cows, and basically force that bull to come defend them when you come in there and, attack with a bugle, so to speak, his harem, like you're trying to take his ladies, because that bull has no options at that point. Well, I mean, he can either abandon his harem, which he's not going to do, generally speaking, or he can come defend that harem, and that's your opportunity.
Come try and kick your ass.
Yeah, that's actually the bull that I sent you guys the picture of from 2016. That's how I got that one. That's how I've gotten several of my elk. But we had been on that bull. We were going up the mountain early. We knew where they were. We'd been there several days at that point. And it started to rain right before it started to break daylight. So I threw up my little emergency tarp real quick, and we kind of got under there. And as soon as the rain broke, I peek out from underneath the edge of the tarp, and I'm looking up the hill, and I kid you not, like the entire sky is, covered in rain clouds, but for one little hole in the clouds, and there's like that pillar of sunlight coming down through the clouds, shining on the peak of the mountain, or the part of the mountain we were on. And that bull is standing like on this little rock outcropping with the one beam of sun coming through the clouds, shining on that bull on his antlers. It was amazing. And so we start chasing that bull, and we had several encounters with him and his harem. We bumped a couple of the spikes, busted us a couple of times. The satellite bulls, we were trying to get the herd bull. We'd call the satellites in. My buddy actually shot at one of them. And, all these things of just really being aggressive and staying after him. We never lost sight or sound of that herd. And then they went quiet. And I'm like, well, hang on. Something just changed. When they go quiet, you pull out your topo map and you look, and you can see, okay, we're moving in this direction. Last time I heard them, they were this far ahead of me. And look, that far ahead of me is one of those north-facing bedding areas with cover and water that I located on my topo map during my summer e-scouting, my map recon. They just bedded right there. Okay, I don't need to see them or hear them to know that's where they just bedded, if I put all of this together. So then I'm going back to paying attention to the wind and the thermals. If I have to wait an hour to do this, to let the thermal settle, you can do that. But I'm going to set up my plan of attack based on the prevailing winds, if there are any. Generally there are, and the thermals. And you may have to do a little bit of a balancing act between those two, because they're not always complementary. I'm going to work my way in very quietly and carefully for that last 100 yards. if you've got some binoculars, which I always recommend, we always carry a rangefinder, but I like to carry a little small pair of binoculars too, because at this point, this is where I'm really going slow this last 50 to 100 yards here, because I want to see the outmost bedded cows if I can. It's not always possible. And if they've gone quiet, you've got to see them and kind of get yourself positioned as close as you possibly can. Like if you're not sweating when you're doing this, you're not close enough. You should be worried that you're going to bust these things out of there, because if you can do that, there's no such thing as a guarantee, but it's almost a guarantee. If you sound off with a cow call to which that bull will respond, and then you come over him with the biggest, loudest, nastiest bugle you can possibly muster.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You are a bull that is within striking distance of his harem, and he either capitulates and leaves, which I've not really seen one do yet. If you get in close enough like this, if they don't have any cows in heat, it's early in season, they can get up and leave. But if you've got a bull that's concerned about losing a hot cow, he is going to come at least look at you and investigate you, if not outright come to run you off. He wants to defend that harem. And boy, when it happens so fast, and it is the most exciting thing, where because he's looking for you, he's going to come look for the exact spot where that bugle came from. Typically, I'm a solo hunter. If you can, have a buddy who's, competent to go with you and can, then that's obviously better, because you get a little more latitude on your setups that way.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just magic, man. If you can make it work, it's wonderful.
Yeah, that's a thing we didn't do enough of by far, I think, is calling. And that's because at this point, I was thinking, well, I'm going to practice with my call, but, I'm the new guy, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. Then
Yeah.
I get there and start talking. It turns out nobody else had really done a ton of practicing either. So we're like, well, shit, rather than putting out bad calls, maybe we'll just try and, because we were right early, like first week of the first, like literally opening day too.
Yeah.
So we weren't hearing a whole lot of calls again, except for sun's going down and those bulls are rounding up their cows.
Yep.
So I'm
Night calling. Night calling is an absolute blast.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm already, listening to him talk, I'm already kind of reformulating some of my plan for the September
Yeah.
to be to get on top of the freaking ridge opposite of where we saw all the game trails and all the sign going up, and just sitting up there and calling, and then moving a couple 100 yards if I get a response, and calling again to try and narrow in on where the hell they're at.
Yeah, I would do one even better than that. So by that point, you will have your topo maps. You will have studied these exhaustively.
Yep.
You'll have north-facing slopes with water and cover marked on there. I use I'll circle those in green. You'll have,
real quick, well,
Mhm.
before I forget, like when you say water and cover, like are we talking water within a couple 100 yards or water down the hill? Like,
if you can find a bedding area with water in it,
okay,
literally they can drink water from their bed. That's the best scenario.
gotcha.
A lot of cases it depends on the year and the place, of course, but a lot of cases you can do that. They will select the area where they have the most access to food and water with the least effort.
Yeah.
They've got to have the north facing, timbered cover. Earlier in the season, particularly, even way into season, they'll still do this, because they're such heavy body animals with such a massive fur coat and fat layer and all this. They really get hot, and they've got to cool themselves down or keep cool in that the lower temperature areas. But you'll identify all these things on your topo map, have these marked, and you're going to have a plan of attack. And with your knowledge of the elk's daily routine, if you roll into camp at 10 o'clock at night, you don't have to go sit on a hill and scout anywhere the next morning, because they're going to be in these nighttime congregation areas, these low areas.
Yeah, like right at the bottom of drainage with lots.
Get as low as you can get. If you think these are like the 3 or 4 or 5 areas where I expect these elk to be, go to the bottom and listen before daylight. I'll get up 3 hours before daylight and be out there. As I explained, the day that I killed the bull with the one ray of sun on him, we were out there in the dark, in the rain, under a tarp for a while before daylight broke. And in doing so, you can throw a plan together really quickly because they're still talking, particularly if they've got cows at that point, uh, because it's dark, they can't see each other as well. Which that alone, barring any other issues going on, if they can't see each other as well, they're going to be more vocal because that's how they stay in contact with each other as they move. So if you can get out there at night, before the day breaks in a low area, which is where they're going to be in the evening, your plan may come together and like literally on the spot, because when you hear them in that low area, you're going to say, well, if they're here now, then, these are the places where they're going to go this today, midday to bed. And you can follow them. You can, cut around and try to get in between them if you know where they are. All of this plan can be made before you ever get there.
Can we talk a little bit about the different vocalizations that you're using? So, what's different about communicating with elk at night versus, say, pursuing them during the daylight and making contact and waiting for them to bed?
Yeah, at night, you don't actually want to make physical contact with them, be it your person or your scent. The only thing you're looking to do with calls at night is elicit some sort of a response. So you're going to use what would either be now I'm going to use Chris Rowe's terminology here, and there's some debate and differences on what different people call different sounds. I tend to kind of buy into what he suggests as being if we were to put a human rationale to elk communication, he kind of gives it certain names that makes sense to me. I'm not saying it's the right way or not, or anybody else is wrong. But for a cow sound, it would be a lost mew, okay, which is basically it starts high and immediately falls off. The emphasis on that kind of high note. Mm-hmm. And that's basically a cow saying, hey, here I am. Where are you?
It's the same sound my kitten makes when I'm 75% asleep and she wants to play string.
There you go. There you go.
You should have. She made that mew, 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 and I finally got up, meow, and got super excited that I was getting up to play string with her. And I was like, "God damn kitten!"
There you go.
But yeah.
So that it will be the cow sound equivalent of the bull sound would be a location bugle. There's other things you can call it too. Contact bugle, location bugle, but it's basically very heavily focused on that high ringing sound, very clear, high ringing sound of an elk bugle. There's no raspiness, there's no growl, there's no bottom into it. It's just that high pitch ringing. Okay. All we're trying to do at night with our vocalizations is get a response from an elk that, is where, hopefully a couple 100 yards away from us or no closer. You don't actually want to call an elk in at night because, whether they remember this or put the pieces together, I kind of doubt. But, you can introduce your scent to an animal that you want to try to hunt the next morning. Probably not the best idea. Yeah. But all you really want to do is get that the fix on their location by eliciting some sort of response, vocal response. A lot of times at night, especially as you get closer to that mid-month period, you don't even have to do that. You just stop and listen for a few minutes, and you can hear them. Mm-hmm. But if you need to, you can make that kind of locate version of either a cow or bull vocalization. In the daytime, of course, you're still going to use those same vocalizations in order to get a response if you need to locate the elk during the day. But you're also going to want to attract the elk to you at some point when you've got your setup, which we've not talked about that yet. That's a big one too. It's the setup. I prefer to start kind of low on the intensity scale and work my way up as I need to. There's kind of a school of thought of you just, go big or go home, just make the biggest, nastiest sound you can possibly make from the very first time your call touches your lips. I've done it that way. Sometimes it works. To me, it's a lot easier to elevate if you need to than start at the top and really have nowhere to go. Because it's kind of hard to back down. If you've painted a picture for an elk then you start backing down, you're really kind of confusing messages there. And, the scenario in that elk's mind, he kind of has an expectation based on what he hears. Well, now it doesn't really make sense anymore.
Yeah.
So, you talked about being a new caller and not making bad sounds. The good news is there are only a couple of sounds that you really need to make, and elk sound like crap a lot of times too. We've all probably been out there where, we hear, some idiot coming up the trail thinking, God, that guy sounds terrible. I can't believe he even blows a call. He should be ashamed of himself, only to like look down the trail and there's an elk staring at us, and it's a real elk making that sound. Can't tell you how many times I've heard that. And I think I was hunting with my buddy Shane. This is several years ago. And this happened. We hear, what we think is a dude coming up kind of the below the trail that we were on in the morning. And we're looking at each other like, God, that guy is terrible. What does he do? He's got the Primos call, he bought at Walmart on the way to his elk hunt that day or whatever. Doesn't know how to blow it.
Mama in his pocket.
Yeah. And it was a herd of elk.
Turns out some elk just sound like dorks.
Right. You don't have to be that good, put some effort into it. I mean, honestly,
yeah.
If you put 15 minutes a day into it for, like during the summer, a month or two before you go on your elk hunt, you're going to be better than 99% of the guys out there probably. Two cow sounds.
Are you familiar with Slayer calls?
I have actually. I have not used any of their calls. I am familiar with them. In fact, I was just looking at, I want to say, one of their duck calls recently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just getting back into waterfowl hunting after kind of a number of years off. My kids are big enough now that they can start to do that with me. So we've gotten back into it this year. And I was just looking at some Slayer stuff online.
So ducks
Slayer
are
actually,
what I've gotten obsessed with.
Oh, yeah.
I'm very obsessed with.
Slayer actually sent us a Enchantress and a bugle tube. And it is by far the easiest bugle I have ever used. And you can get that super high-pitched bugles without stalling. And it blew my mind. I was like, hell, this is like a beginner's dream here.
Probably 85% of anything you'll ever need to do with a bugle. Then if you can get that high-pitched locate sound, I have not used that call, so I don't know how well you can do with, the raspy or hoarse or dominant bugles is what Chris Rowe would call them. But man, the bulk of your day is going to be spent with that locate bugle with that high pitched sound. So that's great if you've got an easy one to use, because that trips up a lot of guys, with a mouth reed, because there's definitely a learning curve there.
Yeah.
That you really have to put in the work to get through.
So I spent most of my time with the mouth reed just going,
yeah.
Yeah. And this Enchantress is there's no reed. It's a push button.
Yeah.
So it's got a little silicone tongue in there, and you can unscrew the bugle tube, and now you got yourself a cow call.
Nice.
It's pretty slick for a beginner. I mean,
that's a good bridge, to let a guy get out there and actually start to hunt. And, I would always encourage guys, if you're going to use one of those calls, that's fine. Go ahead and put in the work. If you decide you like the elk and want to go back, obviously go ahead and put in the work and learn how to use a mouth diaphragm, because you just have more options basically that way, and you can keep it in your mouth. If you got your bow at full draw, you still got a call to, if you need to stop an elk or whatever for a shot, you can do that. But the only two sounds I think that, you really need kind of, let's say you're the new guy just learning calls, 2 cow sounds, 2 bull sounds. There are others that are very important, but you can start off and do a lot of work with 2 sounds. The lost mew that I mentioned, and then the oh God, I've just gone space here and forgotten what he calls it. Assembly mew. So the lost mew is, hey, here I am, where are you? Okay, kind of the locate cow sound. And then the assembly mew is, I'm here, I want you to come to me. You come to me. That is critical when interacting with a bull if you're using cow sounds to try to call that bull in. If you think about the human language, if I say, hey, you're going to look at me like, well, hey. that doesn't elicit any response from you, like you coming to me.
You got to know, hey, come here.
Hey, you're right. Exactly. The come here is totally different. Now, if I say, excuse me, could you, come here and help me with this for a sec? You're a lot more likely to come closer to me because I've created that expectation, social expectation now of you coming to me based on our vocal interaction. Well, that's what's going on. And maybe it's a little more complicated as I explain it than the elk is actually thinking. But by instinct, they know these things. They do this every day. All of these bulls were raised by cows.
Mm-hmm.
So they've had that interaction with their mother where she says, hey, get over here. We're moving this way. And here you are goofing off in the bushes over there. Get your butt over here. Well, the elk have that in their language too. So if you've got those two sounds, two cow sounds, don't get too wrapped around the handle of having to know every little sound and be so good at it. Like, the guys on, the world championship calls, all this kind of stuff, because you can do a lot of work with just those two sounds at a reasonable level of competence. Okay. Same thing with the bull sound. If you can do a locate bugle, which is that real clear high pitch when we talked about, and then once you get close, let's say you're going to do the bedroom sneak, or you get into to do the challenge, it's called. If it's really a dominance thing more than a challenge thing, I don't know that he's actually challenging a bull. He's just saying, hey, here I am. I'm the boss and I'm going to take your ladies. If you can do that, which is going to start very similar to that locate bugle, that high note that we have, but then you're going to add in some of that lower raspier finish to it. If you can do those two things with bull sounds, that's 90% of your work right there. You can get more advanced and get into the grunts and the chuckles. And there are times when, maybe that helps add some realism to it. But we have to consider that a human's lung capacity and the tools we're using to replicate elk sounds are so pitiful compared to an elk's lung capacity and the volume and the intensity that they're able to create. The absolute best elk caller in the entire world, making his best call, literally the one best call that he will ever make in his entire elk hunting career, still sounds pitiful and weak compared to the real thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to sing "Take Me Home, Country Roads,"
right?
To make it work.
And I the focus of kind of this article, this presentation I put together with my list of 10 here, and there's a lot more to this, is really trying to simplify it. So on the calling side, just do those two cow sounds, two elk sounds, and go hunt.
Yeah.
Because, as I said earlier, you have a lot more important things to figure out than the entire repertoire of calling elk with the minutia of all these little things that they can do. There are some in close sounds that I've used to stop or to call in elk before, where if you find yourself, you've gotten to that edge where you're about to bump that elk. I've literally gotten to within like 35 yards of a bull before either one of us ever knew the other was there. And when you do that, that's not the time to rip out your big, dominant or challenge bugle. Okay, there are some really quiet, easy sounds you can make, but because you're so close to him, he's almost inevitably going to come check you out if you don't screw it up, run him off first.
Yeah.
So, again, don't get wrapped around the handle about being like the best caller in the entire world. And I'm also a huge fan of hunting during the midday. We talked about that a little bit with the challenge thing, but even if you don't know where the elk are, let's say you got up early that morning and you didn't hear anything. Well, your plan is still to execute the bedroom sneak on all of these north facing areas that you've identified on your topo map with cover and water. And if you've got 10 of those in a day, or 10 of those on a map, maybe that's a 2-day plan. But you just start to hit those things and you can tell you're looking at your topo map, where these places are. You're looking at your onX to see, okay, the vegetation is thickest here. The stream is depicted on the map and on my onX here. I can look at satellite imagery. And even in some cases, I can see like a little seep in the side of the mountain where there's water there. That's where I'm going to slow down and start to prospect by calling. So even if I have no idea if there's an elk there, I'm going to get as close as I possibly can to that area. And I'm going to start off with that lost mew of being like a cow who's walked into this bull's, home here and said, "Hey, here I am. Where are you?" And all I'm trying to do is elicit a response. I don't expect him to come to me based on that contact level vocalization.
Yeah,
But
you're
if
just
he talks to me, now I know where he is.
yeah, it's almost like using sonar. You're just pinging out there to see if there's anything in that dark timber.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as soon as you get a response, let's say you get a response and this bull sounds like he's 200 yards away, as fast as you possibly can. I mean, literally run if you can, get as close as possible.
Yeah. See, this makes me so we did see again. I can't. It may have been like 120. I can't remember, but it was way down the line. Guy on the right hand. There's three of us. Guy on the right hand side saw it, but it's like, dang it, that does make me listening to you talk. It's like, yep. I had a gut feeling afterward. It's like we probably should have got up in the trees just a little bit so we weren't visible, because we were right down in the middle, two big freaking mountains coming down to a big wide open drainage.
Yeah.
Basically moose territory down there. It was so damn swampy.
Mm-hmm.
Should have got up in the freaking trees and just licked it 100 yards, maybe not 100 if it was 120, but just licked it over and tried to see if we could just piss him off and bring him on in. Like, again, like we were another bull coming up the drainage going, "Hey, I want your ladies."
Yeah. And
it would have been better than just watching him.
Right. And even if, because of the terrain there, if there's, a lot of water or marshy area between you two, maybe he doesn't want to come to you. But if you get close enough, he's a lot more likely to talk back.
Yep.
So if that's the case, you're going to hear, if you can keep him talking as he moves away, I'm not saying he's running away from you, but he's just going about his daily routine.
Yeah.
As he moves, if you can keep him talking, you can stay on him and get close to him and follow him. Try to turn him around, look at where he's going. Worst case scenario, if you can keep him talking, is you follow him to his bedroom and then, do what we've talked about earlier about once you're getting close to him in his bedroom, he has a lot fewer options. If you're in his home room, let's say his home area, what he's claimed is his for the day, and you're right on top of him.
Yeah.
That's a whole different scenario than, I hear, what I think is a cow or bull or whatever on the other side of the valley or the other side of the mountain over there. That elk has a whole different set of options he's going through in his mind if that happens.
Shit.
We also talked about setup earlier, and this is something that if you guys, if you're an elk hunter and you have not subscribed to, I guess it's a subscription type thing, or, signed on to the elk module at Row Hunting Resources. And I don't know Chris, I've talked to him like one or two times by emails about it, but I'm saying from my personal experience, that is the number one educational resource for an elk hunter that is available.
Yeah. Could you say that one more time? I was busy checking something out over here.
Yep. It is the elk module at Row Hunting Resources. It's rowhuntingresources.com, I believe. That's basically Chris's educational platform where he has, instructionals on calling and all of these things I'm talking about with the elk's daily routine and, what the calls mean, how to make them, strategies he shows in video, him doing all of these things. So it's not just him saying, okay, do this. He actually takes you out into the backcountry and shows you what happens when he does it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just fascinating. And as good as all of that is.
That's perfect, because this spring here, soon as we get kid number 3 on the way, I'm going to have those, those lovely, make sure you stay up till midnight to feed the kid at midnight so that they can make it through the next 3 hours.
Yep.
I was looking at a couple e-scouting courses and just stuff like that to go through just to sharpen the stick before September.
Right. There are some that are maybe more broad, they'll talk about like, your maps and what to pack and your backpack and all this kind of stuff, which, that's fine. I would say do those too. However, overwhelmingly, the number one thing that helped me really get up to speed with elk hunting, and from what I have seen, talking to other people and everything, is pretty record time here to kill an elk every year is the elk module at Row Hunting Resources. And I mean, I have read and studied and watched videos over and over and everything that he's got in there, and it's all just fascinating to me. He focuses a lot on the behavioral aspects of it, which the big thing to me, if you guys haven't figured this one out yet, is calling. That's what turns me on with elk hunting. That's why, and years ago, and fortunately getting back into it now that life and kids are allowing. That's what was the draw to me with waterfowl hunting, is the calling. I would 100% leave my bow in camp before I left my call in camp. No two ways about it.
Yeah.
I love, like, if I've got a couple of buddies, if they get a tag, I'll just go call for them. I don't have to hunt, because that's the part that I enjoy, is the calling. And so Chris talks a lot about the behavioral aspects of, what they're doing and why they're doing it. And if you make this sound, this is what it means. Again, kind of ascribing a human rationale to these sounds, which, he doesn't necessarily do that, but he's making it relatable for us, where, when an elk hears this, maybe it's not the right way to say it, that it means this thing, but it creates an expectation for the elk, or, in their social world, this is what they kind of expect based on that sound. So anyway, all of that is super helpful. There are going to be other things you'll need to study, like for your which backpack to use, or, how to read a map, or all that kind of stuff.
I'm good on all that stuff. It's mostly just the whole, where are the elk? Are they up there? Are they down there?
Well, this will be a great thing for you then. And anybody, again, if you're not like 100% confident that you're going to go kill an elk every year, fantastic tool. It's not that much money. Maybe it's like $100 a year.
It's 100 a year or 11 a month. Yeah.
Yeah, you can get like a monthly as well, I think. So again, I have nothing to do with row hunting resources. I've talked to the guy about email like once or twice, but really helpful to me. The most important thing what I think is the most important thing of the elk module and everything that Chris teaches there, he calls the doorway principle. Okay, again, this is all him. I'm not taking any of it from me. He named it the doorway principle. And this is the single most important thing after wind direction when you're looking at setting up to call in an elk. So he'll do a lot better job of it than I will. So when you get in there, you'll see this. But basically, he says, if you're in your house and, your wife is on the other end of the house, and, you hear her call, hey, I need your help. Come here. Okay. You walk down the hall, and let's say there's 2 rooms at the end of the hallway. Well, she's kind of down there somewhere, but you don't exactly know, was she in the bedroom or the playroom or whatever. Well, you're going to get to a point where you can see into those rooms, kind of in, where the doorway to those rooms are, and you're going to look. And if you don't see her where you think she is, you're going to do one of 2 things. You're either going to say, hey, where are you? And then she's going to respond, and you're going to say, oh, you're in, the bedroom. I'll go in this bedroom. Or you're going to walk up to the door, one of those, and kind of stick your head in and look around. And then you're going to say, hey. And then you say, oh, she responded from the closet is why I can't see her. But there is an expectation created of location based on the sound. So you're going to get to the last point where you think you should be able to see the location of that sound, and you're going to stop. That's the doorway. Okay. He kind of illustrates it as, your wife calling you from the other end of the house. So the doorway principle is what he calls it. And he shows it in these videos. And as a solo elk hunter, there is nothing that you can do that will make or break your hunt more than setting up with the doorway principle in mind. And it's a lot easier said than done in some cases, just based on the terrain. But basically, before you ever make the first, when you are at your, what you consider to be your calling location, your stand location, let's say, before you ever make the first sound with your elk call, once your feet are in that spot, you've got to look around and say, okay, if I call from right here, and the bull is over there in that direction, let's say, we followed him up the mountain and we know he's kind of in that general direction.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming from that way. Where is he going to first be able to see my location? Okay. Because this is where the sound is coming from. This is where he expects the elk to be. So wherever the first location from his direction, wherever that first location is where he can see where I'm calling from, that's where he's going to stop. And if you look at your location and say, Well, it's open enough that he can see me from 80 yards away over there. Do not call from right there, because that bull is going to stop 80 yards away in the doorway and look to see where is that elk that I heard that I'm coming to now. So you move yourself up 60 yards so that the doorway is now 20 yards away. Of course, everything changes when you do that, so you may have to do this a couple of times. Move left, right, whatever. You've got to set it up with either terrain or vegetation edge breaks or something like that, where the elk has to come within bow range for bow hunting here, has to come within bow range of your calling location before he can see where you are. If you do that, again, there are no guarantees in hunting, but it is almost like magic, where you don't have to worry about having the second caller, which makes it easier for sure. If you can do that, that's great. If you've got somebody competent and willing to be your calling partner, do that by all means. But I was kind of forced into being a solo elk hunter because we all work and my buddies couldn't go or whatever. I drew the tag and they didn't that year. But this has really helped, where if you can kind of just take a second and look around and figure out, oh no, this is way too wide open, I can't call from here because he's going to stop 80 yards away. Reposition yourself so that there's like a little small opening inside of some really thick timber. He's going to come to the edge of that opening and stop. Well, if that opening is 20 yards away, there's your shot.
Yep.
So huge thing is a doorway principle to dictate the location of your setups.
Well, hang on. All right, so we just crossed over 2 hours.
All right.
I would love to have you back on to keep going on about this.
Awesome.
Like,
We haven't even touched.
Oh, I know that.
We haven't.
I'm
touched
literally
your
over here.
equipment, where you hunt, nothing yet, man. No,
I'm
this
over
is-
here on Onyx looking at licenses, looking at
Yeah.
where we're going to archery hunt this year, looking at possible rifle tags. I have discovered Unit 501. It would take 6 points to get a bull tag up in there for first season. I could go up in there first season. I've already found spots that like I could hike in. I'm broken. Like this looks like easy. I mean,
we give you
everything
solid
looks
across
easy
the
from
air,
the satellite,
and you're
but
going,
I'm rethinking my elk hunt too, my elk strategy, because I've got.
oh hell,
I
501. That's
hope
right
to
over
God.
Deckers.
I
Here's
hope
this-
to God I can draw this fucking tag this year.
These guys are over here just
But
furiously scribbling notes. While I have one question that I think we're going to use to round this out.
the burning one.
The burning
The one
question.
he's been
Yes.
waiting to ask forever.
If you could hunt one dinosaur, what would it be and what would you hunt it with?
Man, that is fun. That's a good question.
we should really ask our guests at the beginning of the
No,
at the
Well,
beginning
actually,
of the
like-
show.
on this,
No,
homie,
no,
this is-
wait.
this is
Hear me
good.
out. Ask them at the beginning so they can think about it over the course of the show, and then demand an answer at the end of the show.
There's so many right answers here, but I mean, can I give two answers?
Yeah,
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
all day long.
So,
There's
so
no
the two
rules.
things that come to mind are the mid-size predatory dinosaur, something like you would think like a velociraptor from what was that stupid movie?
Jurassic Park.
That, yeah.
He's obviously not a fan.
I want to hunt. Well, except the scene where the T-Rex ate the guy on the toilet. That was pretty cool.
That was awesome. That was a
I
shitty
want
deal.
to hunt velociraptors with a minigun.
Ooh.
Oh,
Okay, I'm in.
I like that.
Or I want to hunt a T-Rex with a Barrett 50 cal.
Okay, yeah. I thought you were gonna go bow, and I was like, bro. No,
It's
yeah.
a big
Barrett
bow. He's
would be.
gonna hunt it with a ballista.
Yeah,
It's
I
a
mean,
big bow.
maybe
Just use a
dangerous game would be
spear.
fun, like with a bow. I mean, I know there are guys that do it, but I just
Not
don't have
a
that much to
fucking
prove
T-Rex.
anymore. So I'm going with a 50 cal.
That's how
But-
ballistas
but it's
were
like,
invented.
that's
I
a
have a
big,
spear and I
dangerous
want to
animal.
launch it.
But how much fun would it be to cut like velociraptors in half with a minigun?
I mean,
Fuck
that
yeah,
sounds like a
dude.
hell of a lot of fun.
Especially if they actually were pack hunters and you have a whole pack of them just
Ooh.
chilling there.
If it's a pack of
Would
them,
the
I
mini-
want to hunt them with like an RPG-7. Like at that point, you just aim for the middle and flash.
Would the
if there's a
minigun
pack of them
be?
coming at me? I'd want to be like Audie Murphy on that tank, with a machine gun, just mowing them down, coming across that field.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
Dave
perfect.
wants to know what
sometimes, like,
machinery.
inside of a tank.
Dave wants to know
I-
what
no, I- I
machinery
w-
that
I was
minigun's
thinking-
attached to.
Yeah, I was like stationary. Is it going to be on the ground? Is it going to be out of a helicopter? Is it?
A tree stand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with a minigunner, you'd have to be on a vehicle of some kind. I mean, that's not something that
Yeah.
the Arnold
Hoverboard.
Schwarzenegger movie, notwithstanding, not something you're really going to be toting around. Certainly not when you start lighting that thing off. It's not going to be aimed where you want it to be aimed anymore. If you do,
Mm-hmm.
Hunting velociraptors with a roof-mounted M134 on a Toyota Hilux.
what could be
In
better?
white.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing could be better. You've got your Hilux, you've got
Yep.
your minigun, and you've got velociraptors dying for no reason.
I mean, I'm
Perfect.
into the technical, so
No reason.
All right, so
the best reason.
remember my original answer was velociraptors also. What if the trick is they actually did fly and I would need a shotgun for them?
Oof.
you're aiming at the
AA
tree
12.
line and they just swoop in from above and gouge your eyes out.
Oh, God.
That
Man,
works.
if velociraptors fly, I'm out. I'm
Yeah.
out.
Turns out there was less
Minigun
gravity
to
back
sky.
then.
Just point minigun up.
Except for he maxes out his elevation about right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, my answer doesn't
Well.
change. I'm just using an airplane.
Yeah.
And then that was the
With no
mid-size.
gun.
You said there was two.
You're just gonna just use the airplane.
Yeah.
Hit them
Not
like
a
this.
Japanese airplane.
Oh, you dick.
No, the other
I
one
thought
was
you were a fan.
Sam. The other one was T-Rex with a Barrett 50 cal.
Oh, okay. I got so wrapped up in the minigun thing that I totally forgot.
I don't think a T-Rex would very much like a depleted uranium round to the skull.
I was thinking, T-Rex and a tank.
Hey,
that would be.
Don't you
perfect.
know those things are bulletproof?
Well,
I mean, according to the movies, yeah.
they turned around and blind fired M16s at the thing. Like, yeah, that's going to work.
Mm.
They brought M16s. Yeah, that's going to work.
Yeah.
They didn't
poor
bring a
choice.
tank. They didn't bring a vehicle that probably weighs as much as the animal does.
They didn't.
Right.
They didn't bring
okay.
more than 2 rounds.
The T-Rex has to have a soft spot, right? I bet a Barrett will punch right through that little soft spot. I am
I
in
bet the
agreement
Barrett would
with
punch
Kyle.
right through the hard spot.
Yeah, get you some AP ammo. I think you'd be okay.
Yeah.
API, just so you can cook the brain on the way.
There you
out,
I like
just in
that.
case.
Yep.
Heat it up in there.
How about some heat? Let's just do some heat.
There you go. Yeah, a Mark 19 would be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
You're going to heat. Go ahead. Squash it.
If only, right?
Yeah. So
Well-
what was that other movie? I think Jack Black was in it. They went to maybe it was one of the Jurassic Park series.
Oh,
And there was a mosquito like as big as my torso or
it was
something.
that was that King Kong movie Peter Jackson made that
Oh,
was
yeah.
like 4 hours long.
Yes.
That would have been a pretty
Oh,
decent
yeah.
movie if it wasn't like I have been staring at you people walking across a bridge for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like, he got his britches a little bit big from doing Lord of the Rings successfully, and he made that King Kong movie, which if you narrowed it down would have been probably pretty decent. But I just
Yeah.
remember being so damn bored halfway through.
There's
But
a
I just
reason-
think, if you had a mosquito that big, maybe go out there with like some number 4 buck or something and a shotgun. You could do some wing shooting with those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing flying likes when things go through its wings.
Mike would
They may
make
run around on the
Skeeter
ground for a
bulgogi.
while, but they don't like being shot through the wings.
Stop.
Well, that was
Shut up,
Dave.
Dave.
All right. Well, speaking of
Well-
Dave, I think we will wrap this one up for tonight, and then we will.
Indeed.
I think. Well, hang on, man. You're so quick to end. You're almost
You're
like
so
me.
whiny.
I said indeed.
Oh, okay. Well done, sir.
Indeed's nuts. No, I'm
He didn't say, well, anyway.
Well,
No.
anyway, no, we'll have Vince reach back out to you, and we'll figure out what our return date is here pretty quick.
Awesome.
I definitely want to keep going on the elk thing because, like,
This
Absolutely.
is actually like it's fantastic information. Like this is stuff I
and I think between now and then, I'm going to go ahead and sign up for that the module you recommended and start combing through that, because it's about time I start getting on that. And that one, yeah, I was doing a little bit of research on the side, and it looks about very nice.
It's fantastic.
So,
Kyle,
all right,
where can people find you?
Riflespeed.com.
Besides
Awesome.
Tennessee.
Or in the Rockies come September.
Actually, I'm not going to get to go elk hunting this year. I am committed to, actually a couple of different hunts. We're doing a waterfowl hunt. May have two actually lined up, one in North Dakota. And depending on how things go politically, because it's getting a little crazy up there, we may go up to Saskatchewan again. I used to go every year and just loved it. But we're going to do that again this year. We've got some buddies in Montana that may come out, or we may go over there as well. And then going to do some upland hunting. Going to take my daughter, Liberty, to South Dakota for some pheasants.
nice.
So between that and our fall travel schedule with Riflespeed, we do events and demos all over the country.
Yeah.
We got actually some really cool stuff we're going to be doing this year at some of these that I hope to be able to announce sometime in the next few weeks or this next month. Between all of that, that's really all I'm going to be able to fit into the fall and still, have somewhat of a married life and a ability to run a business,
Yeah, I suppose priorities and all that. All right, Dave,
Well,
bring us out.
support the sport and take a buddy hunting. Get some trauma training. Follow us on Instagram at Let's Go Hunt Podcast. Let's Go Hunt on YouTube and Reddit at r/Let's Go Hunt Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, tell your friends and family about us. Check the show notes for info on Initiative 91, the ban on cat hunting here in Colorado. Thanks for listening, and let's go hunt.
Yeah, and check out Riflespeed. Personally, I think Bedroom Stalk for the show title.
And Rifle Speed.
Bedroom
Bedroom
Stock
Stock
and
has to be
Bedroom
the show
Stalk,
title.
yeah.
How about Bedroom Stock, Riflespeed's mad scientist?
That'll work. And we are off air as soon as I can hit the end stream button. There we go.
You will never find